wish I could tell you more exciting things that I'm doing. But I'm not doing many exciting things now. Exciting things are for the morning, really, aren't they? I could go out again, walking about in the dark. But I'm not sure what the point would be. Might be quite good, actually. Might just do it anyway. Do some more video in it. I've realised that I could never really run out of things to say. It seemed like it seemed uh it seemed to me at one point like I only had so much energy for conversations with the camera, with the YouTube, and that whole notion has just been completely eradicated. I think I'm okay now with having the quieter times and the so-called downtime, but I'm not letting anything stop me from getting right back into the action now. And I have no idea what I was thinking before. I must have been in a really bad place to have forgotten just how easy it is to pick up this little thing and start talking to Cam. Hey Cam. Hey Cam. Camera. Cameraman. Camera and the camera. It's raining outside. You see, it's just like a Mr. Beast video. Again. Which one, I hear you ask? It's like the one where, stay trapped in this room for 100 days and you will get $100,000. Except no one's going to pay me a penny. Or they might. We'll see, we'll find out. What I've actually realised is this. Within just these four walls, if I have myself, I can create unlimited entertainment for myself. And if I can do that for myself, I can do that for someone else. It just means having a camera to point at me in order to be able to do something with the video. And I've now committed myself to doing this basically every second of the day that I possibly can. And since I've decided to do that, all my thoughts have changed for the better. My mental state has improved quite a lot. So, let's look around the room. First thing over there is the mirror. Now, mirrors are great. And I could tell you lots of reasons as to why mirrors are great. Now, I could just sit here talking to myself in exactly the same way as I am doing with this camera. And the fact that I can see myself in the screen gives me a visual representation of what I look like as I'm talking right here, right now. Only difference is the screen shows me that just like the mirror does. But the camera is also there. That means you can take that image and you can lock it into space and time. And create a motion picture which can stop, which can start, which can play, which can pause. And before that existed, before that technology was invented, the only thing that came close to that was this, the mirror. Now, there must have been many points in time in the history of this earth where people who have lived have spent a period of time in solitude, and I would imagine that with enough time spent alone, you will see, and this is going to tie back to what I was talking about, you will see, just as I'm sure the Mr. Beast team saw when they kept somebody in a room for 100 days, that with enough time, left alone, in solitude, people will begin talking to themselves for entertainment in order to occupy their mind, in order to have some kind of sensory stimulus. Now, if you're in a room by yourself, let's say for 100 days, you would not be able to hear a single sound within that room. And if you didn't say a single word out loud for that entire 100 days, you wouldn't hear a sound. Apart from those that you make, tapping, footsteps on the floor, and primarily the sounds that you make with your mouth. Now, I'm getting to the point, and there's lots of co-tangled points here, which I'm bringing together. You're going to see how they come together. I hope you're following this. It seems that through psychological analysis based on the experiences of people who have been kept in this solitary confinement style situation, that they reach a point where they will start talking to themselves out loud. Now, my question is, if you had all these walls that surrounded you, but no mirror, you would find yourself talking, 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 for 100 days, but never seeing yourself, only seeing these walls that surround you. Now, if you just had a mirror in the room, you could sit and you could look into this mirror and you could at least feel some semblance of being able to have a conversation with another person, even if it is only you, even if it is only your reflection. So, here was the point of what I was going to say, what I was coming to eventually. To me, this explains the social media phenomenon. There are many, many people who have been alone in some sense for quite some time. And they're now turning to cameras instead of turning to people out there in the real world. And I actually think it's a great thing. I think it's filled a space in the world that maybe people didn't even know was there. And people want to watch this stuff now more than ever. I got around to doing the dishes. I did it before. Didn't film it, didn't talk about it. But that's not me no more. I'm that guy now. I film everything. I talk about everything. As much as I can. As much as I can stand to. This is the experiment. I'm invested. This is the cultural shift in action. We all know it. We've all thought about it. We can all see it. That is just the way it is. So now, flip. There we go. Beautiful. I'm going to take care of this pile of washing. It sits here in the corner of the wardrobe. It's not the best place to do it, but just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Things will never be the same. That's just the way it is. Oh yeah. But still I see no changes. I wake up in the morning and I ask myself, is life worth living? Should I blast myself? Tupac. Oh man. I've got this power washing that I don't seem to ever quite get to the bottom of. Which means that there's always just stuff that's been there for like way too long. If I was going to fix that, I would basically just have to do a wash way more often than I do. I guess at least twice as often. I guess the pattern that I've fallen into is just only doing it when sort of pushed to the point of necessity for clean clothes, which is not the best way to do it, really. But it is what it is. It seems that without the impetus or drive to achieve, then achievement just becomes something that you could bypass in favour of something you have more of an interest in. And there's no end to the interesting things that you can find now. Both in the world and on the internet. So, not that it's one or the other. I think that sort of oversimplification of understanding is made fairly often by people. As they say, the internet is not real life, and real life is not like the internet. And it's as if the internet and real life, real life, quotation marks, it's as if they are seen as opposites, which they're not, really. The internet is a part of real life, I would say. And so, if one is part of the other, how can they be opposite? Right? It's like a room is part of a house. So, you can't say a room is the opposite of a house. But people may make a statement like that if, for instance, they were looking to rent a room in a house as opposed to renting an entire house. That might lead them to say, well, that therefore a room is opposite to a house. Sort of makes sense in the way I just said it, but it's not really true. Now, there's many tasks that I could and should be getting on with within the house and outside of the house. Just, you know, uh, just there's many things that I could be getting on with. Alrighty then. I'm finishing off my book. Prince Harry Spare. I'm close to the end now. I was reading this on TikTok Live on page 470. So you know what? I'm going to finish it off now. Just for you. And then I got to start on my next book. My mum. What did my mum give me? Something about music. Right, here we go. Can't stay here, we said. And yet, brief as it was, that taste of freedom had got us thinking. What if life could be like that all the time? What if we could spend at least part of each year somewhere far away? Still doing work for the Queen, but beyond the reach of the press. Free. Free from the British press. Free from the drama. Free from the lies. But also free from the supposed public interest that was used to justify the frenzied coverage of us. The question was, where? We talked about New Zealand. We talked about South Africa. Half the year in Cape Town, maybe. That could work. Away from the drama, but closer to my conservation work and to 18 other Commonwealth countries. I'd run the idea by Granny once before. She'd even signed off on it, and I'd run it by Pa at Clarence House, the Wasp present. He told me to put it in writing, which I'd done immediately. Within a few days, it was all in the papers and caused a huge stink. So now, at the end of December 2019, when I was chatting with Pa on the phone, saying we were more serious than ever about spending part of the year away from Britain, I wasn't having it when he said that I must write it down. Yeah, did that once before, Pa, and our plan immediately got leaked and scuppered. Can't help you if you don't put it in writing, darling boy. These things have to go through government. For the love of... ... So, in the first days of 2020... So, in the first days of January 2020, I sent him a watermarked letter broadly outlining the idea with bullet points and many details. Throughout the exchanges that followed, all marked private and confidential, I hammered the essential theme. We were prepared to make any sacrifice necessary to find some peace and safety, including relinquishing our Sussex titles. I rang to get his thoughts. He wouldn't come to the phone. I soon received a long email from him saying we'd have to sit down and discuss the whole thing in person. He'd like us to come back as soon as possible. You're in luck, Pa. We're coming back to Britain in the next few days to see Granny. So, when can we meet? Not before the end of January. What? That's more than a month away. I'm in Scotland. I can't get there before then. I really hope and trust that we'll be able to have further conversations without this getting into the public domain and it becoming a circus, I wrote. He responded with what felt like an ominous threat. You'll be disobeying orders from the monarch and myself if you persist in this course of action before we have a chance to sit down. 73. I rang Granny on January 3rd. We're coming back to Britain, I said. We'd love to see you. I told her explicitly that we hoped to discuss with her our plan to create a different working arrangement. She wasn't pleased, neither was she shocked. She knew how unhappy we were. She'd seen this day on the horizon. One good chat with my grandmother, I felt, would bring this ordeal to an end. I said, Granny, are you free? Yes, of course, I'm free all week. The diary is clear. That's great. Meg and I can come up for tea and then drive back to London. We have an engagement at Canada House the next day. You'll be exhausted from the travel. Do you want to stay here? By here she meant Sandringham. Yes, that would be easier, and I told her so. That'll be lovely, thank you. Are you planning to see your father too? I asked, but he said it's impossible. He's in Scotland and can't leave until the end of the month. She made little sound, a sigh or a knowing grunt. I had to laugh. She said, I have only one thing to say about that. Yes? Your father always does what he wants to do. Days later, January 5th, as Meg and I boarded a flight in Vancouver, I got a frantic note from our staff, who'd received a frantic note from the Bee. Granny wouldn't be able to see me. Initially, Her Majesty thought this would be possible. It will not. The Duke of Sussex cannot come to Norfolk tomorrow. Her Majesty will be able to arrange another MTG, I think that's meeting, this month. No announcements about anything shall be issued until such a meeting takes place. I said to Meg, they're blocking me from seeing my own grandmother. When we landed, I considered driving straight to Sandringham anyway. To hell with the Bee. Who is he to try to block me? I imagined our car being stopped at the gate by Palace police. I imagined smashing past security, the gate snapping across the bonnet. Diverting fantasy and a fun way to spend the trip from the airport, but no. I'd have to bide my time. When we reached Frogmore, I rang Granny again. I imagined the phone ringing on her desk. I could actually hear it in my mind. Brang. Like the red phone in the VHR tent. Troops in contact. Then I heard her voice. Hello? Hi, Granny, it's Harry. Sorry, I must have misunderstood you the other day when you said you didn't have anything going on today. Something came up that I wasn't aware of. Her voice was strange. Can I pop in tomorrow then, Granny? Well, I'm busy all week. At least, she added, that was what the Bee told her. Is he in the room with you, Granny? No answer. 74. We got word from Sarah that the Sun was about to run a story saying the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were stepping away from their royal duties to spend more time in Canada. A sad little man, the newspaper's showbiz editor, was said to be the lead reporter on the story. Why him? Why of all people the showbiz guy? Because lately he'd refashioned himself into some sort of quasi-royal correspondent, largely on the strength of his secret relationship with one particularly close friend of Willie's com secretary, who'd fed him trivial and mostly fake gossip. He was sure to get everything wrong, as he'd got everything wrong on his last big exclusive, Tiaragate. He was equally sure to cram his story into the paper as fast as possible, because he was likely working in concert with the palace, whose courtiers were determined to get ahead of us and spin the story. We didn't want that. We didn't want anyone else breaking our news, twisting our news. We'd have to rush out a statement. I phoned Granny again, told her about the Sun, told her we might need to hurry out a statement. She understood. She'd allow it, so as long as it didn't add to speculation, quote unquote. I didn't tell her exactly what our statement would say. She didn't ask. But also, I didn't fully know yet. I gave her the gist, however, and mentioned some of the basic details I'd outlined in the memo Pa had demanded, and which she'd seen. The wording needed to be precise, and it needed to be bland, calm. We didn't want to assign any blame, didn't want to stoke the fires, mustn't add to speculation. Formidable writing challenge. We soon realised it wasn't possible. We didn't have time to get our statement out there first. We opened a bottle of wine. Proceed, sad little man, proceed. He did. The Sun posted his story late that night, and again on the morning's front page. Headline, "We're off." As expected, the story depicted our departure as a rollicking, carefree, hedonistic tapping out, rather than a careful retreat and attempt at self-preservation. It also included the telling detail that we'd offered to relinquish our Sussex titles. There was only one document on earth in which that detail was mentioned, my private and confidential letter to my father, to which a shockingly, damningly small number of people had access. We hadn't mentioned it to even our closest friends. January 7th, we worked some more on the draft, did a brief public appearance, met our staff. Finally, knowing more details were about to be leaked, on January 8th we hunkered down deep inside Buckingham Palace, in one of the main staterooms with the two most senior members of our staff. I'd always liked that stateroom, its pale walls, its sparkly crystal chandelier, but now it struck me as especially lovely, and I thought, has it always been so? Has it always looked so royal? In a corner of the stateroom was a grand wooden desk. We used this as our workspace. We took turns sitting there, typing on a laptop. We tried out different phrases. We wanted to say that we were taking a reduced role. Stepping back, but not down. Hard to get the exact wording, the right tone, serious but respectful. Occasionally one of us would stretch out in a nearby armchair or give the eyes a rest by gazing out of the two huge windows onto the gardens. When I needed a longer break, I set off on a trek across the oceanic carpet. On the far side of the room, in the left corner, a small door led to the Belgian suite, where Meg and I had once spent the night. In the near corner stood two tall wooden doors, the kind people think of when they hear the word palace. These led to a room in which I had attended countless cocktail parties. I thought back on those gatherings, on all the good times I'd had in this place. I remembered the room right next door was where the family always gathered for drinks before Christmas lunch. I went out into the hall. There was a tall, beautiful Christmas tree, still brightly lit. I stood before it, reminiscing. I removed two ornaments, soft little corgis, and brought them back to the staffers, one each. "Souvenir of this strange mission," I said. They were touched, but a bit guilty. I assured them, "No one will miss 'em." Words that seemed double-edged. Late in the day, as we crawled closer to a final draft, the staffers began to feel anxious. They worried aloud if their involvement would be discovered. If so, what would it mean for their jobs? But mostly they were excited. They felt that they were on the side of right. Both had read every word of abuse in the press and on social media going back months and months. At 6 p.m. it was done. We gathered around the laptop, read the draft one last time. One staffer messaged the private secretaries of Granny, Pa and Willie, told them what was coming. Willie's guy replied immediately, "This is going to go nuclear." I knew, of course, that many Britons would be shocked and saddened, which made my stomach churn. But in due course, once they knew the truth, I felt confident they'd understand. One of the staffers said, "Are we doing this?" Meg and I both said, "Yes, there's no other choice." We sent a statement to our social media person. Within a minute there it was, live on our Instagram page, the only platform available to us. We all hugged, wiped our eyes, and quickly gathered our things. Meg and I walked out of the palace and jumped into our car. As we sped towards Frogmore, the news was already on the radio. Every channel. We picked one, Magic FM, Meg's favourite. We listened to the presenter work himself into a very British lather. We held hands and shared a smile with our bodyguards in the front seat. Then we all gazed silently out of the windows. 75. Days later, there was a meeting at Sandringham. I don't remember who called it the Sandringham Summit. Someone in the press, I suspect. On my way there, I got a text from Marco about a story in the Times. Willie was declaring that he and I were now separate entities, quote unquote. I've put my arm around my brother all our lives and I can't do that anymore, he said. Meg had come back to Canada to be with Archie, so I was on my own for this summit. I got there early, hoping to have a quick chat with Granny. She was sitting on a bench before the fireplace and I sat down beside her. I saw the wasp react with alarm. He went buzzing off and moments later returned with Pa, who sat beside me. Immediately after him came Willie, who looked at me as if he planned to murder me. Hello, Harold. He sat across from me, separate entities indeed. When all participants had arrived, we shifted to a long conference table with Granny at the head. Before each chair was a royal notepad and pencil. The bee and the wasp conducted a quick summary of where we were. The subject of the press came up pretty quickly. I referenced their cruel and criminal behaviour, but said they'd had a ton of help. This family had enabled the papers by looking the other way or by actively courting them. And some of the staff had worked directly with the press, briefing them, planting stories, occasionally rewarding and feting them. The press was a big part of why we'd come to this crisis. Their business model demanded that we be in constant conflict, but they weren't the only culprits. I looked at Willie. This was his moment to jump in, echo what I was saying, talk about his maddening experiences with Pa and Camilla. Instead, he complained about a story in the morning papers, suggesting that he was the reason we were leaving. I'm now being accused of bullying you and Meg out of the family. I wanted to say we had nothing to do with that story, but imagine how you might feel if we had leaked it. Then you'll know how Meg and I have felt for the last 3 years. Then you'll know how Meg and I have felt the last 3 years. The private secretaries began to address Granny about the 5 options. Your Majesty, you've seen the 5 options. Yes, she said, we all had. They'd been emailed to us, 5 different ways of proceeding. Option 1 was continuous of the status quo. Meg and I don't leave, everyone tries to go back to normal. Option 5 was full severance, no royal role, no working for Granny, and total loss of security. Option 3 was somewhere in between, a compromise, closest to what we'd originally proposed. I told everyone assembled that, above all, I was desperate to keep security. That was what worried me most, my family's physical safety. I wanted to prevent a repeat of history, another untimely death, like the one that had rocked this family to its core 23 years earlier, and from which we were still trying to recover. I'd consulted with several palace veterans, people who knew the inner workings of the monarchy and its history, and they all said option 3 was best for all parties. Meg and I living elsewhere part of the year, continuing our work, retaining security, returning to Britain for charities, ceremonies, events. Sensible solution, these palace veterans said, and eminently doable. But the family, of course, pushed me to take option 1. Barring that, they would only accept option 5. We discussed the 5 options for nearly an hour. At last, the bee got up and went round the table, handing out a draft of a statement the palace would soon be releasing, announcing implementation of option 5. Wait, I'm confused. You've already drafted a statement before any discussion announcing option 5. In other words, the fix was in this whole time. This summit was just for show. No answer. I asked if there were drafts of other statements announcing the other options. Oh, yes, of course, the bee assured me. Can I see them? Alas, his printer had gone on the blink, he said. The odds. At the very moment he was about to print out those other drafts. I started laughing. Is this some kind of joke? Everyone was staring away or down at their shoes. I turned to Granny. Do you mind if I take a moment, get some air? Of course. I left the room. I walked into a big hall and ran into Lady Susan, who'd worked for Granny for years, and Mr. R, my former upstairs neighbour in the Badger set. They could see I was upset, and they asked if there was anything they could do for me. I smiled and said no thank you, then went back into the room. There was some discussion at this point of option 3, or was it option 2? It was all starting to give me a headache. They were wearing me down. I didn't bloody care which option we adopted, so long as security remained in place. I pleaded for continuation of the same armed police protection I'd had and needed since birth. I'd never been allowed to go anywhere without 3 armed bodyguards, even when I was supposedly the most popular member of the royal family. And now I was the target, along with my wife and son, of unprecedented hate. And the leading proposal under discussion called for total abandonment. Madness. I offered to defray the cost of security out of my own pocket. I wasn't sure how I'd do that, but I'd find a way. I made one last pitch. Look, please, Meg and I don't care about perks. We care about working, serving and staying alive. This seemed simple and persuasive. All the heads around the table went up and down. As the meeting came to a close, there was a basic general agreement. The many fine, granular details of this hybrid arrangement would be sorted out over a 12-month transitional period, during which we'd continue to have security. Granny rose, we all rose, she walked out. For me, there was one more piece of unfinished business. I went off to find the office of the bee. Luckily, I ran into the Queen's friendliest page, who'd always liked me. I asked for directions. He said he'd take me himself. He led me through the kitchen, up some back stairs, down a narrow corridor. Just that way, he said, pointing. A few steps later, I came upon a huge printer, churning out documents. The bee's assistant swung into view. Hello. I pointed at the printer and said, This seems to be working fine. Yes, Your Royal Highness, not broken. That thing is indestructible, sir. I asked about the printer in the bee's office. That one worked too. Oh, yes, sir. Did you need to print something out? No, thank you. I went further down the corridor, through a door. Everything suddenly looked familiar. Then I remembered this was the corridor where I'd slept that Christmas after returning from the South Pole. And now along came the bee, head on. He saw me and looked extremely sheepish for a bee. He could tell what I was up to. He heard the printer whirring away. He knew he was busted. Oh, sir, please, sir, don't worry about that. It's really not important, isn't it? I walked away from him, went downstairs. Someone suggested that before I left, I should step outside with Willie, cool our heads. All right. We went up and down the yew hedges. The day was freezing. I was wearing only a light jacket, and Willie was in a jumper, so both of us were shivering. I was struck again by the beauty of it all. As in the stateroom, I felt as if I'd never seen a palace before. These gardens, I thought, they're paradise. Why can't we just enjoy them? I was braced for a lecture. It didn't come. Willie was subdued. He wanted to listen. For the first time in a long time, my brother heard me out, and I was so grateful. I told him about one past staff member sabotaging Meg, plotting against her. I told him about one current staff member whose close friend was taking payments for leaking private stuff to the press about Meg and me. My sources on this were above reproach, including several journalists and barristers. Plus, I'd made a visit to New Scotland Yard. Willie frowned. He and Kate had their own suspicions. He'd look into it. We agreed to keep talking. 76. I jumped into the car and was immediately told that a strongly worded denial had been put out by the palace, squashing that morning's bullying story. The denial was signed by none other than me and Willie, my name attached by faceless others to words I'd never even seen, let alone approved. I was stunned. I went back to Frogmore. From there, remotely, over the next few days, I took part in the drafting of a final statement which went out on January 18th, 2020. The palace announced that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had agreed to step back, quote unquote, that we no longer formally, quote unquote, represent the Queen, that our HRH titles would be in abeyance, quote unquote, during this transitional year, and that we'd offered to reimburse the sovereign grant for refurbishments to Frogmore Cottage. Affirm no comment on the status of our security. I flew back to Vancouver, delicious reunion with Meg, Archie and the dogs, and yet for a few days I didn't feel fully back. Part of me was still in Britain, still at Sandringham. I spent hours glued to my phone and the internet, monitoring the fallout. The ire directed at us by the papers and the trolls was alarming. Make no mistake, it's an insult, cried the Daily Mail, which convened a Fleet Street jury to consider our crimes. Among them was the Queen's ex-press secretary, who concluded with his fellow jurors that we should hereafter expect no mercy. I shook my head. No mercy, the language of war. Clearly this was more than simple anger. These men and women saw me as an existential threat. If our leaving posed a threat to the monarchy, as some were saying, then it posed a threat to all those covering the monarchy for a living. Hence, we had to be destroyed. One of this lot who'd written a book about me and thus provably depended on me to pay her rent went on live TV to explain confidently that Meg and I had departed from Britain without so much as a by your leave to Granny. We discussed it with no one, she said, not even Pa. She announced these falsehoods with such unfaltering certainty that even I was tempted to believe her, and thus her version of events quickly became the truth, quote unquote, in many circles. Harry blindsided the Queen. That was the narrative that took hold. I could feel it oozing into history books, and I could imagine boys and girls at Ludgrove decades hence having that hogwash rammed down their throats. I sat up late brooding on it all, going over the progression of events and asking myself, what's the matter with these people? What makes them like this? Is it all just about the money? Isn't it always? All my life I've heard people saying the monarchy was expensive, anachronistic, and Meg and I were now served up as proof. Our wedding was cited as Exhibit A. It cost millions, and therefore we'd upped and left. Ingrates. But the family paid for the actual wedding, and a huge portion of the remaining cost was for security, much of which was made necessary by the press stirring up racism and class resentment. And the security experts themselves told us the snipers and sniffer dogs weren't just for us. They were there to prevent a shooter from strafing the crowds on the long walk, or a suicide bomber blowing up the parade route. Maybe money sits at the heart of every controversy about monarchy. Britain has long had trouble making up its mind. Britain has long had trouble making up its mind. Many support the crown, but many also feel anxious about the cost. That anxiety is increased by the fact that the cost is unknowable. Depends on who's crunching the numbers. Does the crown cost taxpayers? Yes. Does it also pay a fortune into government coffers? Also yes. Does the crown generate tourism income that benefits all? Of course. Does it also rest upon lands obtained and secured when the system was unjust and wealth was generated by exploited workers and thuggery, annexation and enslaved people? Can anyone deny it? According to the last study I saw, the monarchy costs the average taxpayer the price of a pint each year. In light of its many good works, that seems a pretty sound investment. In light I'll start that bit again. According to the last study I saw, the monarchy costs the average taxpayer the price of a pint each year. In light of its many good works, that seems a pretty sound investment. But no one wants to hear a prince argue for the existence of a monarchy any more than they want to hear a prince argue against it. I leave cost-benefit analyses to others. My emotions are complicated on this subject, naturally, but my bottom line position isn't. I'll forever support my queen, my commander-in-chief, my granny, even after she's gone. My problem has never been with the monarchy, or the concept of monarchy. It's been with the press and the sick relationship that's evolved between it and the palace. I love my mother country, and I love my family, and I always will. I just wish, at the second darkest moment of my life, they'd both been there for me. And I believe they'll look back one day and wish they had too. 77. The question was where to live. We considered Canada. By and large, it had been good to us. It had already come to feel like home. We could imagine spending the rest of our lives there, and if we could just find a place the press didn't know about, we said, Canada might be the answer. Meg got in touch with a Vancouver friend, who connected us with an estate agent, and we started looking at houses. We were taking first steps trying to be positive. Doesn't really matter where we live, we said, so long as the palace fulfills its obligation, and what I felt was its implicit promise to keep us safe. Meg asked me one night, You don't think they'd ever pull our security, do you? Never, not in this climate of hate, and not after what happened to my mother. Also, not in the wake of my Uncle Andrew. He was embroiled in a shameful scandal, accused of the sexual assault of a young woman, and no one had so much as suggested that he lose his security. Whatever grievances people had against us, sex crimes weren't on the list. February 2020, I scooped Archie from his nap and took him out to the lawn. It was sunny, cold, and we gazed at the water, touched the dry leaves, collected rocks and twigs. I kissed his chubby little cheeks, tickled him, and glanced down at my phone to see a text from the head of our security team, Lloyd. He needed to see me. I carried Archie across the garden and handed him to Meg. Then we went across the soggy grass to the cottage, where Lloyd and the other bodyguards were staying. We sat on a bench, both of us wearing puffer jackets, waves rolling gently in the background. Lloyd told me that our security was being pulled. He and the whole team had been ordered to evacuate. Surely they can't. I would tend to agree, but they are. So much for the year of transition. The threat level for us, Lloyd said, was still higher than for that of nearly every other royal, equal to that assigned the Queen. And yet the word had come down, and there was to be no arguing. So here we are, I said, the ultimate nightmare, the worst of all worst-case scenarios. Any bad actor in the world would now be able to find us, and it would be just me with a pistol to stop them. Oh wait, no pistol, I'm in Canada. I rang Pa, he wouldn't take my calls. Just then I got a text from Willie, can you speak? Great, I was sure my older brother, after our recent walk in the Sandringham Gardens, would be sympathetic, that he'd step up. He said it was a government decision, nothing to be done. 78. Lloyd was pleading with his superiors at home, trying to get them at least to postpone the date when he and his team pulled out. He showed me the emails. He wrote, We can't just leave them here. The person at the other end wrote, The decision has been made. As of March 31st, they're by themselves. I scrambled to find new security. I spoke to consultants, gathered estimates. I filled a notebook with research. The palace directed me to a firm which quoted me a price, $6 million a year. I slowly hung up. In the midst of all this darkness came the horrible news that my old friend Carolyn Flack had taken her life. She couldn't stand it anymore, apparently. The relentless abuse at the hands of the press, year after year, had finally broken her. I felt so awful for her family. I remembered how they'd all suffered for her mortal sin of going out with me. She'd been so light and funny that night we met. The definition of carefree. It would have been impossible then to imagine this outcome. I told myself it was an important reminder. I wasn't being overdramatic. I wasn't warning about things that would never happen. What Meg and I were dealing with was indeed a question of life and death, and time was running out. In March 2020, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic, and Canada began to discuss the possibility of closing its borders. But Meg had zero doubt. They're definitely going to close those borders, so we need to figure out somewhere else to go and get there. 79. We were having a chat with Tyler Perry, the actor, writer, director. He'd sent a note to Meg before the wedding, out of the blue, telling her that she wasn't alone, that he saw what was happening. Now FaceTiming with him, Meg and I were trying to put on a brave face, but we were both a mess. Tyler saw, he asked what was up. We gave him the highlights, the loss of security, the borders closing, nowhere to turn. Whoa, okay, that's a lot, but just breathe, breathe. That was the problem, we couldn't breathe. Look, take my house. What? My house in Los Angeles. It's gated, it's secure, you'll be safe there, I'll keep you safe. He was travelling, he explained, working on a project, so the house was empty, waiting for us. It was too much, too generous, but we accepted eagerly. I asked why he was doing this. My mother loved your mother. I was caught completely by surprise. He said, after your mother visited Harlem, that was it. She could do no wrong in Maxine Perry's book. He went on to say that his mother had died 10 years earlier and he was still grieving. I wanted to tell him it gets easier. I didn't. 80. The house was Xanadu, high ceilings, priceless art, beautiful swimming pool, palatial, but above all ultra safe. Better yet, it came with security, paid for by Tyler. We spent those last days of March 2020 exploring, unpacking, trying to get our bearings. Halls, wardrobes, bedrooms. There seemed no end of spaces to discover, and niches for Archie to hide. Meg introduced him to everything. Look at this statue. Look at this fountain. Look at these hummingbirds in the garden. In the front hall was a painting he found especially interesting. He started every day locked onto it. A scene from ancient Rome. We asked each other why. No clue. Within a week, Tyler's house felt like home. Archie took his first steps in the garden a couple of months later, at the height of the global pandemic lockdown. We clapped, hugged him, cheered. I thought for a moment how nice it would be to share the news with Grandpa or Uncle Willie. Not long after those first steps, Archie went marching up to his favourite painting in the front hall. He stared at it, made a gurgle of recognition. Meg leaned in for a closer look. She noticed for the first time a nameplate on the frame. Goddess of the Hunt, Diana. When we told Tyler, he said he hadn't known. He'd forgotten the painting was even there. He said, gives me chills. Us too, 81. Late at night, with everyone asleep, I'd walk the house, checking the doors and windows. Then I'd sit on the balcony or the edge of the garden and roll a joint. The house looked down onto a valley, across a hillside thick with frogs. I'd listen to their late night song, smell the flower-scented air. The frogs, the smells, the trees, the big starry sky, it all brought me back to Botswana. But maybe it's not just the flora and fauna, I thought. Maybe it's more the feeling of safety, of life. We were able to get a lot of work done, and we had a lot of work to do. We launched a foundation. I reconnected with my contacts in world conservation. Things were getting under control, and then the press somehow learned we were at Tyler's. It had taken 6 weeks exactly, same as Canada. Suddenly, there were drones overhead, paps across the street, paps across the valley. They cut the fence. We patched the fence. We stopped venturing outside. The garden was in full view of the paps. Next came the helicopters. Sadly, we were going to have to flee. We'd need to find somewhere new and soon. And that would mean paying for our own security. I went back to my notebooks, started contacting security firms again. Meg and I sat down to work out exactly how much security we could afford and how much house. Exactly then, while we were revising our budget, word came down. Pa was cutting me off. I recognised the absurdity, a man in his mid-30s being financially cut off by his father. But Pa wasn't merely my father, he was my boss, my banker, my comptroller, keeper of the purse strings throughout my adult life. Cutting me off therefore meant firing me, without redundancy pay, and casting me into the void after a lifetime of service. More, after a lifetime of rendering me otherwise unemployable. I felt fatted for the slaughter, suckled like a veal calf. I'd never asked to be financially dependent on Pa. I'd been forced into this surreal state, this unending Truman Show in which I almost never carried money, never owned a car, never carried a house key, never once ordered anything online, never received a single box from Amazon, almost never travelled on the Underground, once at Eton on a theatre trip. Sponge, the papers called me. But there's a big difference between being a sponge and being prohibited from learning independence. After decades of being rigorously and systematically infantilized, I was now abruptly abandoned and mocked for being immature, for not standing on my own 2 feet. The question of how to pay for a home and security kept Meg and me awake at nights. We could always spend some of my inheritance from Mummy, we said, but that felt like a last resort. We saw that money as belonging to Archie and his sibling. It was then that we learned Meg was pregnant, 82. We found a place, priced at a steep discount, just up the coast, outside Santa Barbara, lots of room, large gardens, a climbing frame, even a pond with koi carp. The koi was stressed, the estate agent warned. So are we, we'll all get along famously. No, the agent explained, the koi need very particular care. You'll have to hire a koi guy. Uh-huh. And where does one find a koi guy? The agent wasn't sure. We laughed. First world problems. We took a tour. The place was a dream. We asked Tyler to look at it too, and he said, buy it. So we pulled together a down payment, took out a mortgage, and in July 2020 we moved in. The move itself required only a couple of hours. Everything we owned fitted into 13 suitcases. That first night we had a quiet drink in celebration, roasted a chicken, went to bed early. All was well, we said, and yet Meg was still under loads of stress. There was a pressing issue with her legal case against the tabloids. The Mail was up to its usual tricks. Their first crack at offering a defence had been patently ridiculous. So now they were trying a new defence, which was even more ridiculous. They were arguing that they printed Meg's letter to her father because of a story in People magazine, which quoted a handful of Meg's friends anonymously. The tabloids argued that Meg had orchestrated these quotes, used her friends as de facto spokespeople, and thus the Mail had every right to publish her letter to her father. More, they now wanted the names of Meg's previously anonymous friends read into the official court record to destroy them. Meg was determined to do everything in her power to prevent that. She'd been staying up late, night after night, trying to work out how to save these people. And now, on our first morning in the new house, she reported abdominal pains and bleeding. Then she collapsed to the floor. We raced to the local hospital. When the doctor walked into the room, I didn't hear one word she said. I just watched her face. Her body language, I already knew, we both did. There had been so much blood. Still, hearing the words was a blow. Meg grabbed me. I held her. We both wept. In my life, I'd felt totally helpless only 4 times. In the back of the car while Mummy and Willie and I were being chased by the Paps. In the Apache above Afghanistan, unable to get clearance to do my duty. At Knockcott when my pregnant wife was planning to take her life. And now. We left the hospital with our unborn child, a tiny package. We went to a place, a secret place only we knew. Under a spreading banyan tree while Meg wept, I dug a hole with my hands and set the tiny package softly in the ground. 83. 5 months later, Christmas 2020, we took Archie to find a Christmas tree, a pop-up lot in Santa Barbara. We bought one of the biggest spruces they had. We brought it home, set it up in the living room, magnificent. We stood back, admiring, counting our blessings. New home, healthy boy. Plus, we'd signed several corporate partnerships which would give us a chance to resume our work, to spotlight the causes we cared about, to tell the stories we felt were vital, and to pay for our security. It was Christmas Eve. We FaceTimed with several friends, including a few in Britain. We watched Archie running around the tree, and we opened presents, keeping to the Windsor family tradition. One present was a little Christmas ornament of the Queen. I roared, "What the?" Meg and I had spotted it in a local store and thought I might like it. Oh, Meg had spotted it in a local store and thought I might like it. I held it to the light. It was Granny's face to a T. I hung it on an eye-level branch. It made me happy to see her there. It made Meg and me smile. But then Archie, playing around the tree, jostled the stand, shook the tree, and Granny fell. I heard a smash and turned. Pieces lay all over the floor. Archie ran and grabbed a spray bottle. For some reason he thought spraying water on the broken pieces would fix it. Meg said, "No, Archie, no, do not spray Gangan." I grabbed a dustpan and swept up the pieces, all the while thinking, this is weird. Okay, I'm going to stop there for now. Not quite finished the book yet. Got up to page 493. It's 500 and... about 510 pages in total. So, probably... about 17 pages away. So I'll finish it off at some point.